So I'm going to share some lines from, I guess you could call it a poem or an essay, created from putting together letters from more than 700 respondents who wrote messages of love. And the poet took pieces from those messages and created a beautiful essay, which is far too long to read, but I will share with you the final part. Dear Nathan, my sweet son, please go to sleep. Mommy has to keep working and get up soon before the moon switches with the sun. Dear Grandma, we haven't spoken for a while now, and I suppose that's my fault. I haven't been in the best of moods, and I'll soon you know why. As you know, I've always kept our letters wedged underneath my box spring. They have slept soundly as long as I can remember. So quiet and peaceful. Dear me, I know you are suffering. Dear darkness, I am tired of you. Dear lawmakers, you're hammering away at my daughter's rights. Dear world, dear world, dear world. You won't be able to read this for another few years, and even then it may not make much sense. But here is the message, my dear. There is beauty in the worst of us. Trees are your friends, but not geese. They will poop. They will poop everywhere and try to nest in your flower pots. Ignore my tangential goose warnings. Your destiny is determined by the life cards you choose to play. Always believe Gandalf. If you should happen upon these words, know I have lived in many daydream moments with thoughts of you. My solitude allows me the time to reflect and care, arrange a memory in rhyme, to hold it close and fair. Love me. I always believe Gandalf. Beloveds, when I became a mother, I realize now, I didn't then, but I realize now that I carried it somewhere in here. I carried a set of absolutely, completely, 100% impossible ideas about mother love. I was supposed to make them happy all the time. I was supposed to make them successful most of the time, or both, well, maybe and both. The first time other women in the supermarket gave me the hairy eyeball, you know the hairy eyeball, right? A thought bubble is clear, why can't you keep your children under control? Because my kids were either making too much noise, dancing in the aisles. We had a game where one of them would be a shark who would pop up. Not good for unsuspecting shoppers. Or begging me for something that they really wanted. I recently laughed when I went to the Stop and Shop and I saw, you know, those little plastic dinosaurs with a straw sticking out of them. They used to be called Siposaurus. I think I might have bought 50 of them in my day. I felt in those moments, I felt that I had broken the number one commandment of motherhood: thou shalt not allow thy children to create a public disturbance, especially in the supermarket. Thou wilt be shunned. Thou wilt be judged. Also convicted and judged by a jury of your clearly more competent motherly peers. In those early years, as I struggled with what to do and how, and beating myself up a good deal of the time, I've had lunch every week with a close friend of mine. We had been companions in a recovery program for many years. And he is about 10 years older than I am, and he would always say the following in some form. He would say, as long as you love them, it will be all right. And I would nod enthusiastically because that sounded right. And I had no idea what it meant. I loved them, but they weren't happy all the time. I loved them except when they made a ruckus in the supermarket and made me look bad. What kind of a mother feels that? I was afraid to ask, because how can a man of all people know better than I what being a mother meant? Shame, my friends, shame was my teacher, much more often than love. That may be true for some of you or not, but it was in my case. And the other truth is that I didn't come to grips with that for a very long time. In fact, that journey of learning to come to grips with shame and exchanging it slowly, step by step, for a path of love began in the Unitarian Universalist congregation. Many years ago, when my kids were young, and I heard the minister, and you've heard me say this before, it was blah, 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 and whoever you love, you are welcome here. And all of a sudden, I felt something different. I felt the beginning. I couldn't have told you that, but I felt the beginning, understanding, learning the path of love. I needed this faith community to do that. I needed first to know that I am welcome and that I can perhaps learn to receive love, no matter how I choose to love, or the decisions I make for my life, or the truth I find, or how I imagine the sacred. I needed to accept that love of others, to see it, even if I didn't believe it for myself. I needed to see it in order to love myself, and therefore calm down with some of this craziness I had. I needed to learn that my children's behavior was not a report card or a referendum on my value as a mother. I needed to learn that my children's behavior was evidence of what they might need, or what they were really, really, really good at. And I needed to learn that in those moments, it was about them, not me. And I needed to learn that shame is a terrible teacher and an impossible taskmaster, and that no one of us will ever be good enough for what shame demands. When John Winthrop, who would become the first Puritan governor of Massachusetts, stood on the deck of the Arabella towards the end of their journey with a group of what I'm sure were soggy, not very good smelling, fairly grumpy Puritans, rethinking this decision they had made to take this journey. Standing in front of them, he said these words, and I share them with you because these words are the ancestor of our covenants. And these words, as old-fashioned as they may sound, are actually a practical guide to how to love. He said, now, the only way to avoid shipwreck and to provide for our posterity is to follow the counsel of Micah. Micah is one of the prophets in the Hebrew Bible. To do justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with our God. We must be willing to abridge ourselves of our superfluities, which actually in English means get rid of stuff we don't need, for the supply of others' necessities. We must hold a familiar commerce together in all meekness, gentleness, and patience, and liberality. And I love this part. We must delight in each other, make others' conditions our own, rejoice together, mourn together, labor and suffer together, always having before our eyes our commission and community in the work, our community as members of the same body. I don't know about you, but I think that's beautiful. So shall we keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Close to 300 years later, as Unitarianism went from being a dirty word to the name for a new, more progressive religious faith tradition that adhered to reason and adhered to things that don't require us perhaps to make claims we don't believe. The heirs of that Puritan speech, our ancestors in the faith created the following covenant. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God. You heard me say perhaps a few minutes ago, what is doctrine? Doctrine is teaching. Teaching, whoops, as I also shared with you, teaching I had never had. I'd never had that example. I'd never had that speech. It was more like do this or my gestures won't get me in trouble someday. Now, I have watched more than my quota of Hallmark movies. I know all about love. I had memorized the Catholic Church Catechism in Spain of all my sins, and trust me, I knew them all. I remember them. They ranged from chewing gum to committing murder. Maybe not in that order, but in my mind, those were the two big ones. I had subsidized the college educations of more than half a dozen therapists, and I had taken parenting classes. I considered myself an expert on love. I will say, all of these things have value. They didn't teach me. None of those things taught me that love wasn't a feeling or an instruction. Love was a choice. That love was something to choose every day, and sometimes every minute. Because in all my aspirations, I failed with my children. I failed at each and every one of them so many times I stopped counting. But love, as the song we shared together, to begin again in love, at the end of the day, is the most beautiful and healthy thing, in my opinion, any of us can do. When our Unitarian Universalist Association congregations affirmed last spring that love is at the center of all of our theologies, you can look at the front of your order of service and see this beautiful flower and these words that tell about the different ways love is at the center of all that we do. And I will just say, the simplest way I can say it is this. Love will teach us if we're willing to learn. We will teach one another. And if we make that choice, moment by moment, day to day, to grow in our ways of loving one another, to grow in our ways of humility sometimes, meekness, patience, really always being aware of other people's needs. Our community will grow, continue to grow, and continue to teach. Our doctrine will continue to be taught and learned and treasured as imperfectly as we may carry it out. So I'm going to take this a step further and get really practical with you all, because one of the things I really want to do this morning is to have us show one another how it is that we as individuals in a community continue to choose love every day. So the first thing I'd like to do is to commission our compassion care teams. How many of you have received kindness and love from the compassion care team? Yeah, lots of hands. So if I could ask the members of that team, if they would, to come forward. Jeannie Lawler, Dale Richter, Mary, is it Robinson? Sorry if I forget the names. I know that Linda Holbrook, Dale, Stefan and Deb Becker, who are not here today. Am I missing anyone else, Linda? Oh, Deborah Greenslit, who may be on Zoom too, because sometimes Deborah has some difficulties in coming here. So first, please give some applause, some love to the members of your They have written, I don't know how many hundreds of cards and prepared how many meals and orchestrated a network of care for everyone here. I'm going to ask you, if you would, to stay standing. I'm going to say to you, I commission you and your companions who are not here this morning to continue the work of choosing love and giving compassion care to everyone in this community. Thank you for what you do. And please stay there if you would. Now, my friends, if any of you have prepared a meal for someone in need, would you please rise in body or spirit? If any of you have volunteered on any of the many committees or teams or efforts that take place in this congregation, please stand in body or spirit. If you have written a card or delivered a plant or made a telephone call to someone or to a family in need of care, would you rise in body or spirit? If during our time of joys and sorrows, you have shared a prayer or a reflection of light and loving kindness for someone who has spoken openly of their truth, please rise in body or spirit. If you taught our children, encourage them, have sung in the choir, or been a greeter, or donated to this congregation or to our monthly Share the Plate, please rise in body or spirit. I'm sure there are things I am missing, but if you've done anything good, please rise in body or spirit. If you have shown love, smiled, laughed at any of my jokes, that's kindness. Beloveds, look around at the choices that all of us here have made for one another.